This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Hello, listener. Welcome back. It is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
What's up, man?
Hey, not much. For you listening to the podcast, please do not adjust your podcast. You are listening to Breaking Down Security, but our guest this week is somebody you may have heard on another podcast. And no, we didn't bring Jerry and the other guy back on. We are happy to have Martin Fisher on this week to welcome him to the podcast.
Hey, Brian, longtime listener, first-time caller.
I believe the first-time caller bit, but not the long-time listener. Yeah. We're big in Outer Mongolia, but not here in the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard your .nk downloads are pretty high. So.
That's right. Yeah, and this other country that I keep hearing about. So, yeah. So,
I'm glad to be here. Thanks very much.
Awesome, man. So, you've maybe for people who don't listen to Southern Fried Security, maybe you could give us a little bit of your background and where you're at in your career and what you do for a living.
Sure. I am the manager for IT security / CISO for a hospital system here in the Atlanta area.
Okay.
The Southern Fried Security podcast has been around for almost 6 years.
Wow.
I host it. I'm on sabbatical right now, but normally I host it. We have 4 other folks, Andy and Yvette and Sparkles
Mm-hmm.
and Steve who participate. It's your typical infosec podcast. Our deal when we started it was we did not want to do a technical podcast because people like Paul were doing that at the time, and none of us were overly technical. Instead, we felt there wasn't a lot of conversations headed toward security leaders and security managers, and what we wanted to do is talk about security from a leadership and management perspective to give listeners not just what we felt was happening in the community, but actionable things they could do as a leader, as a manager, running a program, and calling out smoke and mirrors when it was smoke and mirrors, or calling out BS when we felt it, but also I think picking out sometimes that diamond in the rough, going, this is something. You, Mr. CISO, want to be. Here's something you need to pay attention to, because this is genuinely important, and it's been a lot of fun to do.
Awesome. So for the reason we had you on, by the way, if you're listening to our podcast, when you get done, go download Southern Fried Security. I've listened to all of them. It's kind of a thing I do. It's the OCD in me. Episode 1 all the way up to the latest version. I do that. They're good for CPEs. If you're a CISSP, they'll take them. So that's cool. So what we wanted to have you on this week for is to discuss the differences and the versus security influence versus security mandate. This was something me and Mr. Betcher had thought up about a couple of weeks ago, and it was suggested to have Mr. Martin on, and we were going to have him on at DerbyCon, but since he was not going to be on at DerbyCon, he's not going to be there. We decided to have him on here. And we wanted to discuss the difference between security influence and security mandate. And maybe we could start off with some definitions. What does everybody here in the office, in the room here, think security influence is?
I think for me, it's getting folks to do the right thing because of the relationships they have, versus policy 64-3 says I must.
Okay, so that's the mandate portion. It's, I'm being told to do it versus
well, the influence is I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Mandate is I'm doing it because the policy says I have to.
Okay.
I think if you're looking at it from the recipient perspective, you and I were talking a little, in the past around, we as security folks hate compliance people who tell us that we have to do things a certain way, to be PCI compliant, even though those things make absolutely no sense sometimes. To the eyes of people in the business, a lot of things that we tell them they have to do around two-factor auth or full disk encryption that we know are the right thing to do, they object to it because it gets in the way of sometimes of them doing business, and they don't understand the why of it. Now, if you're influencing folks, you're explaining, hey, I totally get why this is a problem for you. Let's work together to minimize that impact. They also educated them to understand this is why the mandate's there. This is why the rule is there, and why that rule is aligned at the end of the day with what everyone in the organization wants to accomplish.
Okay.
Once people get that, you're much more of an influencer versus the infosec cop.
Yeah.
Right. And, to me, the security influence is, being respected throughout the organization for what you offer, right? As opposed to, what you're force feeding everyone in the organization.
So you bring a
right?
body
People
of knowledge.
come to you and respect you because you're on the same team.
Yep.
And to me, a lot of times it breaks down to just how people feel about information security in an organization. In a large enough organization that would have a help desk, if someone's willing to call information security or create a ticket for infosec because they made a mistake, right? Which is potentially even admitting a policy violation, but they're willing to do it. That means you've achieved security influence.
Nice.
If they broke the policy, they knew they broke the policy, and they're terrified that all you're going to do is come down there and fire them for it. Screw you, dude. They're never going to call.
Yeah.
And that is therein lies the difference.
Yeah.
So, Martin, how do you achieve that, though?
It's all about relationships. It's about people feeling that information security not only understands their issues and their concerns, but is willing to be part of their solution. If information security is seen as simply the Department of No, or is seen as simply those folks who wear black, who work in the sub-basement and only ever come out to take people's badge away and escort them off the property, it doesn't work. The way you gain influence as a security professional is, one, understand that only for a very small fraction of us in the community is the business of our business security. The business of my business is healing people, right?
Sure.
The business of the folks who I know in Atlanta, we're big in credit card processing, is to ensure financial transactions go as fast as they can through the environment. And once you understand that, and then the folks that you're working with understand that you get that the job of the company is the right job, they're going to be much more willing to consider you part of the team. And they're going to be much more willing to open up and see what you're willing to do to help. That takes time. It does not happen overnight. If you're a CISO, if you're a security manager, you're going to spend 6 months, 12 months, 18 months rounding. That's a medical term. You're going to be deliberately visiting peers throughout the organization simply to create the relationship with those managers and those directors and those folks, not just in other places of IT, but out in the lines of business, so that they know who you are, they trust you, and they understand that you're there to help them and simply not beat them with the security stick.
Well, that's hard, Martin, because I would say probably the majority of security people coming from IT and the way that people, I guess, their personalities are in this business is introverted. And it's hard to go out there for them and, make these relationships, right? Because they are by nature introverted. So they, it's difficult to step out of that shell. I mean, how do we do that? Do we just bite the bullet, crap our pants, and jump in? I mean, what?
All right. So let me answer it this way. I believe that the most effective thing a security professional or security leader can do is create these relationships. If you as a professional, we should all want to be as effective as we can in our given vocation. Sometimes that means doing hard things. I'm actually not an extrovert. I forced myself to do it. And I've learned ways of engaging people and introducing myself to people. And I've, created a podcast was part of it. Was how do I get out of this comfort zone of sitting in my cubicle all day firing off, policy violation emails to everybody. No, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk to people, right? I'm going to go out and visit people. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes, just like any skill, right? And that skill, well, if you do it and you start doing it, you will differentiate yourself from so many other people in our community. And you will be seen as someone different, someone more effective. And your job, in a very odd way, by learning that hard skill, will become easier. Because you will have, through your influence and through these relationships you create, you've added people to the security team. When you have someone, if you got influence with folks where they're willing to go, I know I should not have taken this USB stick and plugged it into my laptop at work, right? And they saw something happen on their screen, so they know something bad has happened. If they're comfortable enough with you to call you and go, Brian, man, I know you were out here a couple weeks ago. You told us not to do it. I totally brain farted and I did it. What do I do next? You're like, it's cool. It's cool. Disconnect from the network. I'm going to send one of my guys out there. It's okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Right. And provided this person hasn't done this like 5 times in the last 3 weeks. That's all. There's going to be a ticket in the ITSM system. That a technician got dispatched to do a slick and rebuild of a computer or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's it. We're not going to bring the full power of God down on them for the policy violation. They know they broke the policy, and the fact that you're willing to go, thanks for letting me know. I will help you fix this, and we won't talk about it again. Dude, you now have an advocate for your security program in that department that money could not buy.
Yeah.
Ever. And you stopped an incident in this nascent stage.
So it's like you're by networking, you're gaining deputies to champion your cause without even adding them to your security team. You're gaining
the oriented policing, I guess.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
In that, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned effectiveness, and I think to be a more effective security employee or organization, you have to step out of that shell and do what doesn't come naturally and build these relationships with everyone around you.
Absolutely.
And that's the key.
And one of the things, let's say that you're one of those folks out there and you're like, okay, so, you're going to give what Martin says a little bit of a chance. I'm going to recommend a podcast to all your listeners. It's called Manager Tools.
Oh.
Mark Horstman, Michael Zand, 2 guys, they're West Point graduates. They have a management consulting company, and they have a Manager Tools podcast and a Career Tools podcast. They talk about being an effective manager and being an effective employee. And a lot of what I'm telling you is exactly what they've talked about for years. It's about relationships. It's about being effective. It's about, what actionable things can you do to improve your career and improve yourself. It's free. You can subscribe for the show notes or whatever. If you only get one thing from the conversation from me tonight, go take a look at that podcast. And just seriously take a listen. It can be transformative in your career if you're willing to let it.
Yeah, I think when we had Phil Beyer on a couple of probably almost 6 months ago, he mentioned that exact podcast too.
Yeah, I tried to Phil onto that about a year ago, and
Okay.
he's been one of the biggest converts I know.
Yeah, I like Phil Beyer. We need to get him back on. So yeah.
Good guy.
Yep. So I came when I was thinking of security influence versus mandate, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be old security versus compliance battle, and I was thinking about when you started talking about building relationships, it was interesting because you were talking about a talk that you gave at B-Sides Atlanta, and it was like security for muggles.
The art of speaking with muggles.
Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry. You're correct. And you said before the podcast, you said you could look out into the audience and you said that a third of them you could tell didn't get it.
Right.
And a third of them did get it. What about the other third?
Those are the interesting third, because putting the best possible construction on what they're probably thinking.
Are those the third that didn't think that they were ever going to need this and they didn't care? And
I think for a lot of them, it was the first time anyone had ever brought it up. Remember, a lot of our InfoSec folks grow up in this very secluded culture, right? They're the computer geek in high school, right? And then they go to a college and they're on the computer track, and there's a small group of people around them. They may play inside of a DC community, or they may go to a conference or whatever. But what's happened is there's been this homogenous community that they're in that has been so focused on technical skills and technical knowledge and the ability to pass the certification tests. It's never even dawned on them that there are carbon-based life forms out there that interact with the silicon that they're monitoring in Splunk.
Yeah.
Right. It just never. And what's interesting is you watch these folks, and they're usually in their early to mid 20s. Some of them are older. It's sort of a Morpheus moment. Mm-hmm. Red pill and a blue pill.
Yeah. Which
one are you going to go? And I think my hope is they begin to realize as they get a little bit older that it is about relationships. It's not just about the machines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that third where this is such an alien concept to them, where or they are so socially broken, they really don't care what anyone else thinks about them.
Is that because they're not thinking about the long game, where one day they might actually want to go into management, or they're just thinking, I'm going to be a pen tester until the day I die?
Maybe a little bit of both. I think so. Part of it's also, and I want to be careful how I say this. So I don't want to sound all old. There's some of the folks that I talked to today who are, recently out of college. There's this very cynical attitude, this very almost nihilistic attitude of, I'm not going to play the game. You accept me for who I am, and if anyone's going to change, it's going to be you.
That's not conducive to a positive security environment.
Well, what it'll do is it'll get you hired as a pen tester. It might get you hired at like a boutique consulting firm if your technical chops are that good. But what's going to happen is you're gonna peak very quickly, right? And there are people who can do that for their whole lives. I know some folks who are, I'm in my late 40s. They're my age or older, who are that way, right? Mm-hmm. And generally, most of them from my day are in IT operations, right? Sure. They're the data center trolls.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're happy there, okay. I guess for me, I've always wanted to grow my career. I've always wanted to be take that next step in responsibility. And if you're that kind of person, you have to realize it's about relationships. Yeah. It's not your technical skills will only get you so far. And that is an ugly truth that a lot of young folks perhaps don't like. The other one is say, hey, I don't want to play the game, right? You know, the capital T and capital G.
Yep.
My responsibility is, well, you may not want to, but you already are. And because of the way you're playing it, you suck.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If they're okay with it, okay. I don't hire these people. When I interview folks, if I get a sense that's who they are, I simply won't hire them.
Yeah.
My philosophy in hiring is if you lack some knowledge or you lack a technical skill, I can get you education, I can get you training. But as we say here in the South, if your mama didn't raise you right, I don't have the time, inclination, or energy to fix you.
Understood. Understood.
It's amazing. 2/3 of the folks I interview, seriously, their mama did not raise them right.
Yeah.
And you know, one guy actually got really mad because he had a great technical resume. And I acknowledge that. But dude, not going to turn you loose in my group.
Yeah.
Because you'll destroy it.
You do the behavioral interviews and that frustrates them?
Very much so.
Really? I'm sorry, behavioral interviews? What, do you ask them like questions? Do you try to get them mad or something?
No, behavioral interviews. So Brian, tell me about a time when you were a sysadmin that systems crashed and the customers were really angry. Tell me what happened and what you did.
Okay. So scenario-based questions.
Right. And not if this happened, what would you do?
What would you? Yeah.
Never ask that.
Yeah.
They will lie. But
yeah.
tell me about an experience in your life, and then tell me what happened. And then you probe into it, right? Interviews for me take a long time,
Okay.
especially if I'm hiring if I'm hiring a direct report. These people are looking at 4 to 12 hours worth of interview.
Holy cow!
Because and this is sort of one of the things from manager tools. The number one most important job a manager does is hire people. The number two most important job is retain the right people.
Yeah.
If you ever have been a manager and you've done a bad hire, it is quite possibly the most painful mistake a manager can make. Because unhiring someone is hard.
Yeah. And then it looks bad on you because you've had to unhire somebody you've hired.
Right. And
expensive.
It's very expensive. So I focus very hard on hiring. I make sure we do it right. And you know, when I joined the hospital, I was the first infosec person they ever hired. Infosec was a distributed activity throughout various groups in IT. And I was brought in to build a department. So we hire a very specific kind of person. I hire nice people. When you walk into my area, people laugh. I mean, we have a fun group of people. Yeah, we do a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But everyone who works for me, you know, my group, their mama raised them right. They're polite. They have good personal hygiene.
That's every day is not a DEF CON for you.
Every day is not, or there's a hope. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, all right. So you were talking about it taking 6, 12, 18 months. Mm-hmm. For you, security is really a long game, and it's not something that can be done overnight by anybody. Because peddling of trust is creating influence, and you got to build all that. It takes time.
This is about relationships. So there's 3 different kinds of power in an organization, right? There's role power. You know, I'm a manager, therefore I have a certain amount of power in the organization. There's expertise power. I am the world's greatest whatever. Therefore, you know, I have a certain amount of authority and power based on the fact that, you know, I'm the world's best TPF programmer. And then those can be useful, right? And as a leader, as a manager, you use role power when you have to. But by far the most powerful in the world is relationship power, where people want to work with you. Mm-hmm. People, you know, they look up and they're like, you know, I like the security team.
Yeah.
You know, I like, you know, working with, you know, when Jay comes down to the physician's practice and starts doing her review, they don't go, oh, security here's doing the risk assessment again this year. They're like, hey, Jay's here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And they love her. They love her team. That's what this is about, because she can sit down and talk with them, and they'll be candid about what's really going on, and she can do little in-service training, fix problems before they actually become an incident, and reinforce. Hey, if you see something, say something, and and hit 3-4 practices in a day, and we're spreading the word, and people are happy, and life is good. But it takes time, because it takes time to build that trust.
So do you think it's a lot of organizations, they want that influence and they want that trust as soon as they can get it, and they don't want to spend the time to build that up? I know we were talking before the podcast about my organization and how we're trying to include security into DevOps, and we're hitting some road bumps instead of becoming like the security girder, the guardrail, like you had mentioned. And those things that you mentioned actually are something that I'm going to take back. So if you have people who have got a negative attitude towards security, is there a way that you can turn that around and make it more? Sometimes. Sometimes
what you have to do is really evaluate the person and figure out why do they have the attitude they do. So it's usually due to an event that happened in the past, or they feel threatened in some way, right? Either professionally or organizationally, they feel threatened. And you can try to work around and through that. At some point, though, you have to determine there are some relationships that you can't invest anymore. At that point, then you realize that you're not going to be able to use relationship power with this person. You're going to have to use role power. But as the organization views that relationship from the outside, if you're known as someone who, hey, Brian's a great guy. When he comes in and we start talking about security policy, even if we made a mistake, he's pretty cool about it. He helps us fix it, make sure that we don't make that mistake again. Or, as we're designing stuff, he makes sure that we don't step on ourselves. But dude, whenever Brian's talking with Alice, there's just a stone cold relationship they got, and man, he's got to beat her up sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? So all true things. But if you've got a reputation as someone who is reasonable, they're going to look at the fact that you have to beat Alice up as not so much a indictment of you, but what the hell is wrong with Alice?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you got to hope for. That's what you got to work for. That you give Alice every opportunity you can, but at some point, especially as a CISO, and sometimes like you have to do it with a toddler. Why? Because I said so.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's what the policy says. And if we need to take this further up the chain, we can do that. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Those relationships can be hard to navigate. You need to make sure that you've got your boss's backing, and that you're not tilting against windmills. It's one thing if Alice is a peer in the organization. It's another thing if Alice is the CLO, right? So tread wisely, young Padawan learners, and figure out those relationships carefully.
Nice. Okay. What's up, Mr. Betcher? You got a question?
No, I have a scenario though.
Oh, hit me with it.
All right. So I was, talking to my friend Leroy, who works for a big company, and they had to cut the number of employees through attrition. The company announced that, they weren't making the numbers, and the investors were going to get, pull their money if they didn't, do something about it. So I guess they determined that the number of employees they had, or the employees that they had on staff, weren't being effective. Effectively, that's what that means. So, and then locally, what they decided to do to cut costs is to stop providing coffee for the employees because it was an expense. Now, think about that. You want your employees to be more effective, but the one thing that, or one of the main things that, increases their effectiveness would be coffee, right? So my point is that typically these soft costs aren't, taken into account, and that there's these unintended consequences to management's actions.
So let's talk about that scenario, because I've been there as well. So one thing as a leader, I believe, is that there is a tax for being a leader. There is a financial cost that I accept for being a leader. And in an organization where I was at that did the same thing, that axed coffee, I went out and I bought a Keurig machine, and I went on Amazon and bought the 96 compartmentalized variety pack of K-Cups and put it in our conference room and said, all right, security team, here's the coffee. And yeah, it cost me a couple $100 the first time around, and I think $68.50 every time I refilled it. Yeah, I had some very happy people, right? Sure. And people love to come visit us because they get a free cup of decent coffee. So even then, I think you can sometimes take the really short-sighted decisions that senior leaders can make, or actually not accountants make.
Right.
And you suck it up, right? Because you're not going to change it. Use it to your benefit. And as a leader, sometimes slamming your personal plastic down. And I had to prove, I had to show, because the first time we had something, what? There's free coffee here? They actually went through my expense reports and went through my invoices to make sure that I wasn't, no, this is me. I'm paying for it.
You weren't using the corporate card, yeah.
Right. And that is a huge way, one, of showing your employees you care about them. And two, it's a way, again, it's about influence. You're showing other departments that security is going to do the right thing, and they can come over, and if you need a cup of coffee, come get a cup of coffee, right? Or you throw you have a little thing, hey, if you're not in the department, throw a quarter in, right? Yeah. Or whatever. But you never really enforce it.
So I think the lesson here is that, don't moan and whine about, decisions made about the corporation, because you're part of the corporation too as a leader. Just turn that negative into a positive, right?
Well, so here's as a leader, as a professional leader, if you're a manager, if you're a director, if you have direct reports, to the people who report to you, you are the company. You are them. Never, never, never forget that. Never, 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 never forget that. And you, as a professional leader, you may never, ever, ever, ever publicly disagree with a decision made by your leadership. Yeah. Ever. It is the most unprofessional, undignified. Just, if you can't do it, get the hell out of my industry. Please don't do that kind of thing. Now, for example, when I explained the coffee thing, it's like, hey, we're doing corporate cost cutting. I totally get why we've had to cut our budgets, and I'd much rather cut the corporate coffee budget than have to lay one of y'all off.
Yeah.
But hey, I love you guys to death. And I'm gonna twist my arm. Okay, we'll figure something out. And the next day, the Keurig machine shows up.
Yeah.
And you don't make a big deal about it. It's there, right? And everybody knew where it came from. No one makes a big deal about it. A couple folks said thank you, and you just move on, and you don't linger on those crappy decisions that were made. Now, with that said, I'm now also not advocating as a subordinate leader that you need to back unethical or illegal decisions. you need to look at the decisions being made above you. And if you can't abide by that, you need to leave. I actually have left a job because I could not, in good conscience, carry out the decisions that were being made by the people above me. And just went in that Friday afternoon, I'm like, I'm out. That's okay, right? But if you're going to be a leader. Take care of your folks, but remember, you are them.
I know.
And your people will always know it. You're not your direct report's friend anymore. You're the boss. You control you are a huge influencer on their addiction to food, clothing, and shelter. And they will always remember that.
Nice.
You know.
So as a leader, are there any specific, I don't want to get into the whole philosophy of certifications and degrees over not having certifications or degrees, but I was told by a friend of mine that if I wanted to continue on the infosec track and get into management, that I should get an MBA. And I told him that he was crazy because I don't have any experience with, business administration. But he seems to think that that was actually a useful degree, and he's actually going to get his. Do you see a degree outside of infosec for management to be useful, or maybe a certification like CISO or something like that?
Yes, it can be. So one of the things that I'm actually going to be starting a master's program in information assurance shortly. And I may follow that with a executive MBA, mostly because my employer is very old school and they will pay for it.
Right on.
And also because in the healthcare industry, formal education is highly regarded.
Sure.
Very highly regarded. Other industries, your mileage may vary. In commercial aviation, not so much.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have a bachelor's degree, it's going to be hard, I think, for most people to get past the manager stage where you have direct reports. Mm-hmm. I think for most industries, it's going to be hard to be an executive, which means your direct reports have direct reports who have direct reports. It's hard to get there without a master's. I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, some of the folks I really admire in our industry are very senior executives, but don't have a bachelor's degree. The thing is, they are the minority, because and the reason they got where they are is they are that awesome in what they do. I mean, one of the people I point to is Chris Hoff, right? Mm-hmm. Chris Hoff is one of the most amazing people I know. I'm not that good. As are 99% of the people who are listening to this are not that good. So I'm not going to, if I want to get to, be an executive, an IT executive or a security executive, I'm if I'm counting on my native abilities, ain't going to happen. Invest some time in a master's program or an MBA or whatever, and I increase my chances. Why not? But it's a personal calculus, right? And there's no one right decision for everybody. And it's also one of the things that, and I want to make sure we say this, that the leadership track's not for everybody. One of the things that I think is, as I mentor my direct reports, is some folks, when they're working for me and they may have they have direct reports for a while, or we're trying them out in that role, and they discover they don't want direct reports. They don't like being a manager. And one guy in particular thought he had failed. I'm like, dude, no. You just figured out what you don't want to do, and you didn't crash and burn doing it.
Yeah.
That's a huge, huge win. He got to figure out he wanted to be he was much more suited to architecture and being that uber engineer, problem, solver, designer person than a manager. That's awesome, right? Not everybody can be a CISO. So we need people who want to come in and be that Uber engineer. We need people who want to do ops.
Yeah.
We need people who they come in and they make the donuts.
Yeah.
We need those people. And I think there's this false sense of, if I'm not going to be a CISO, is this all worth it? Well, one, if your whole life is geared toward what job title you have, you're doing it wrong, right? That's a different podcast. But you got to find your happy spot. I mean, Jack Daniels talked, a couple times on burnout. I think a lot of times people burn out because the job they're seeking is not the one they should be seeking.
Yeah.
I've met people who were, they're great business analysts, right? And they're project managers, and they're trying to be technical.
Yeah. Do you think that people try to get? Do you think they try to get certifications and degrees because they want to try to build that influence, and by having that certification, they automatically have influence?
Some do. I think the day and age of that is rapidly coming to a close, if it ever actually existed. So when I'm hiring people and I look at someone who is relatively new to the industry and they've gone out and they've done their, A+ certification, and they to me it demonstrates, or they're an IT guy or IT gal who's gone out and done security stuff, has done Security Plus, even though they're not currently in a security role. To me, that's a demonstration of their desire to do it, and they get bonus points in the process. Now, does the fact that you've got a security certification, if it's a CISSP, whatever it is, does that mean you can actually do anything? Well, other than it proves that you can pass a test, not really. But it gives you a chance for me to say there's a basic level of knowledge that you should have. I'm going to probe on it. I mean, you have no idea the number of people who are CISSPs who, I swear to God, my son and daughter know more about information security than they do.
Yeah.
Frightening how bad some of it is. But, I think when you're looking at folks who are trying to get into a larger organization, if you're trying to get into a Fortune 500, the certifications do help. They help get you to the point where someone's going to look at the resume, right?
Get your foot in the door.
Yeah, or get past the HR guy.
Yeah.
Or the talent acquisition people, they're screening first, right?
Yep.
If they see CISSP or they see any, certified ethical hacker, I think this is one of the most useless certs in the world, but there you have it. All right, I'll put that in the pile for the manager to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's what you're expecting from that certification, you're thinking about it well. If you think that being a certified ethical hacker gives you magical skills to come into my environment and tell me all the things that are wrong, within the first 30 days of you being here, no, not so much.
But it does show, even though, you did knock CEH, and I don't have one, so I don't have any skin in the game, but it does show that you did set a goal and accomplish that goal. You studied, you got the certification, you did something. Right?
I totally agree. I'm not saying don't get certs. I'm saying is if you're going out for certs, be realistic about what that means to you. Now, there are also some folks I know who love doing the certifications because for them, it's sort of like playing Pokemon. They just got to get them all, right? And they want certs simply because personally they want it.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Right. I have no idea what, there's a friend of mine. I have no idea what she's going to do with that CISA, but she has it. And she enjoyed studying for it and taking the test. And I have no idea. My brain doesn't work like that. I cannot remotely understand where the pleasure center gets, activated from that. But for her, it does. Yay. Good for you. Just too many folks, I think, this is usually around the CISSP, just somehow assume that having their CISSP makes them an information security professional.
Yeah, those CISSP people suck, right, Mr. Betcher? They suck.
Well, it's in the name, professional.
Yeah.
Now, I love me some ISC squared people. I mean, Jennifer Manella is one of the people I just admire tremendously.
She's good people.
She's incredibly good people. And I think ISC squared over the last 3 or 4 years has, since there's sort of that insurgent campaign to get real information security professionals on the board, has started making some changes. But they have a long way to go. And let's face it, there's some douche canoe people who have low number CISSP license numbers, and they feel that makes them special. And what's unfortunate is because the U.S. government has officially blessed the CISSP, it's given it a cachet that is, if the government wants it, it must be good enough for everybody. So everyone wants one. There aren't enough out there, which has made the CISSP mills, the boot camp, whatever you want to call it, they're springing up everywhere.
Yeah.
And the people who get through them, they learn how to take a test.
Well, to be fair, I started when I moved to Austin. My first job was with a defense contractor, and it was either get a CISP or 8570 IAM. And I was like, CISP probably going to open more doors for me. So I got the CISP. I actually went to a boot camp in Dallas, passed the test first time, and got it. And I was trying to, one of the things was, and I get that hate, and I can't call it anything other than hate, but you see it on Twitter every once in a while. It's like people like, people with certifications suck, whatever. And I was like, it's not enough just to get it. Then you have to prove that you actually earned, you take the cert and go with it. You don't just rest on your laurels when you get it.
So here's where the hate comes from. When you have someone who has their own, they went to Moo and got their own personal business card,
mm-hmm.
and it's, John A. Smith, CISSP, is the way their business card versus, just John Smith. And then if you go to their LinkedIn profile, they have a CISSP. That's the difference between the two. It's people who think CISSP
it's like PhD or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of post-nominals. MD, I like that one. OD, but even PhD, right? Unless it's on your resume or whatever, you just don't, or if it's in the signature line of your email, right? How many of us have seen the signature lines where it's John Smith, CISSP, CISA, CISM, CEH, and I'm like, really? Are you?
That is too in my face.
Yeah, it's like, what are you trying to prove to whom?
Yeah.
Well, Brian, you'll be happy about this, and the company that you work for may require it, but ISC Squared has a new cloud security certification called the CCSP.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a healthcare one too. I've heard it's like uber simple to pass.
Whoops.
I've heard
certified cloud security professional.
Yep.
Is that you?
No, I probably won't get another certification other than maybe OSCP. I thought about maybe going and getting that one just to, say I can get it. So
that's a tough one.
Yeah, no joke. So, Mr. Betcher, it's getting late for Mr. Fisher, and it's getting late for you, and I've got a thunderstorm over my head. So maybe we finish the podcast up.
All right.
Martin, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you? I know you're on the Twitters. Is there a way they can get a hold of you otherwise?
Sure. On the Twitters, you can get me as @ArmorGuy. It's, also on the emails, it's armorguy@gmail.
Okay.
And www.southernfriesecurity.com.
That's right.
We'll get the podcast website. Let's see, anywhere else? I'd give you my cell phone number, but I'd never remember it. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I love talking with folks, and I really appreciate you guys having me on the podcast tonight.
Cool. Do you do a lot with besides Hot Atlanta down there too?
I do. It's interesting in Atlanta. we have a very laid back information security group. And generally, the way it works is we'll be sitting down at a Taco Mac or wherever, and oh crap, we need to do B-sides again, don't we? And then we pull a rabbit out of a hat. It always turns out well. That's between the universities that we have in town. Big shout out to Kansas State University, great partner.
Nice.
We work really well with them, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, the Atlanta security community, beginning in 2015, a couple of us are getting a little bit more involved, trying to organize some things, and we may actually have some announcements, and I'll come talk to you about it, if and when it happens around a new security conference paradigm.
Awesome.
We'll see what happens.
What?
Very cool. I have a question about that post podcast. Mr. Betcher, how would they get a hold of you?
Just Google me. But
Oh, wow.
one thing
I'm kind of a
one
big
thing
deal.
I
I
have-
know people, and I'm on the internet.
Drop the mic, walk away from the podcast. Just Google me.
Great. Just Google me. I'm on the internet. It's kind of a big deal.
one thing that that I took away from Martin, and thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
If you want to go further in your career, it would behoove you to break out of your shell. If you are an introvert, it really opens some doors.
Yep. Even if
has
it
for
makes
me.
you sweat in weird places, and you get nervous and stuff. Yeah. Because I'm sweating in weird places, but that's because Martin's on. I told Martin that he was a lot of the inspiration for the podcast that we do today, and so it was really awesome having you on, Martin. I appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks, guys.
And Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned on Twitter. He can be also got at the official Breaking Down Security podcast email, bds.podcast@gmail.com. We're on LinkedIn. We have a Facebook page. We have a Tumblr. You can get us at BreakSec on Twitter, and I'm at Brian Break. And we have a Patreon. We're going to have a large bit of this podcast on our Patreon. The podcast is free. It will always be free. But if you want to hear some extras that happened before and after the podcast, you can give us a couple of bucks and listen to some outtakes that we've got with Martin. So we use it to make the podcast a little better. So that was it for this week. I got to go and get in the storm cellar apparently, because thunderstorm's heading right over the top of us. So have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye-bye.